So yeah, the original video's got a copyright takedown. I decided to move everything over to Dailymotion. You can find the links to the Dailymotion versions of the videos in the description box below. However, I am still fighting for the copyright strikes on the originals just for the sake of having those and also the discussion promoted by them be left around for archival purposes. This new video will not serve to mitigate any of the points I made before. If anything, all I do is flesh my ideas out even further. I do make a few corrections in the video, but nothing that backs down on my overall thesis. If anything, I only use those to further enhance my argument. So, hope you like this. My favorite movie of all time is Hot Fuzz.
What the fuck is he on about?
Just kidding, it's Apocalypse Now.
What do you know about
Film.
Measure your goddamn
Massachusetts.
Kidding. I don't actually have a favorite movie. I stand by this ideology of having a sporadic clump of 10 apex films. Here's the list, by the way. But End of Evangelion is absolutely my favorite animated movie, and bar none, my favorite anime. Like, I hold End of Eva and Neon Genesis Eva on two completely separate tiers, despite the fact that the movie is a direct continuation of the show. This shit is legitimate work of art in every sense of the word. In every sense of media production, this is fucking art. In every sense of animation, this is fucking art. And all of it happened in 1997, the same year I was born. Shit is like goddamn motherfucking Stanley Kubrick made a cartoon. And just to elaborate upon that, Akira's Tarantino, Ghost in the Shell is Scorsese, and Ghibli is Spielberg. I'd recommend watching these videos before we dive into this one. They're good prepping material for my mentality, and they'll make a lot of what I say more digestible if you're new to film study. I'm not just saying that because I want a higher view count and audience retention. I'm genuinely saying that because these will be helpful when you're going into this video. Now, as for the End of Evangelion, shit is like a master course on the immersive cinematic experience. And that's a hell of a feat for a traditionally animated film. You really don't see many of these, and they are my favorite thing. Oh, did I mention fuck this movie's English dub? Because despite what a lot of people will tell you, fuck this movie's English dub. So this rant about
Voice acting.
thing that I do for about like 5 minutes is completely irrelevant now because Netflix redubbed the entire film. The main actors do in fact do a good job in their performances. The director was actually very good friends with them, and she did an amazing job of, well, directing them.
I knew Jimmy would pay top dollar to get that stupid doll back.
Every single missile hit the target!
Like, my main qualms with the dub don't stem from the main voice actors for Shinji, Misato, Asuka, and Rei, and Gendo. I think they all do a great job. The problem is, I'm constantly being taken out of the experience by these jarring cartoon character voices present in the secondary cast. The JSDF soldiers sound stupid as hell.
Showtime, ladies. All units move out.
And this dude's just laughing when he's about to blow Shinji's head off, having the time of his damn life!
Sorry, kid. Nothing personal.
The Japanese one has audible regret. Less like he's super relaxed about murder, and more like he's apathetic about what his job is. Based upon official images released with the End of Evangelion's Laserdisc, I'm pretty sure we can infer that Anno was going more for these guys being proficient, normal people, rather than being the squad rolling up into Nerve to plug some bitches. Holla boy! JSDF! JSDF! The Nerve Bridge crew has this one dorky white dude voiced by a black dude with a deep voice.
Damn! Haven't you ever heard of moderation?
Under the original production management, this character was voiced by the ADR director of Eva, so this could have been a jab at him.
Free of what?
It's kind of fucking petty, but okay.
I wish those bastards felt the same way.
And on top of that, there's a lot of problems with the script. Some parts are just flat out errors in terms of Ava's chronology. When Misato's explaining Seilei's intent and the origin of Second Impact to Shinji, everything's going well, until a sudden mistranslation.
Mankind was spawned from a being called Lilith, just like Adam was.
This is actually incorrect. Although within canon, humans were in fact born from Lilith, Adam was not. Adam is its own thing entirely, and was actually the seed of life that created the other angels. A more accurate translation would be something to the tune of, mankind was spawned from a being akin to Adam, known as Lilith. Credit to Ava Monkey for that one. Oh, did I mention the screaming? Because, like, the Japanese ones are like the sounds of actual pain and suffering, and that is legitimately terrifying. The English ones are okay sometimes. You know, for the main cast. But compare this scene where these soldiers are emotionlessly and mercilessly burning an off-screen woman alive. Now compare that to these two dude bros barbecuing Tarzan over here. I mean, there's seriously no comparison unless you want to make this into a comedy movie. The Japanese one's fucking terrifying. Hey, you know, if we're gonna make our English dub a cartoon, let's add a bunch of cartoon sound effects. This is only in the dub track. This is real. I did not edit this in. It was in the wrong fucking audio channel too, did you hear that? Like the gunshots coming from the right side of the room on the right speaker, and the splats coming from the left side of the room on the left speaker. Did you know that sound effect is actually in John Carpenter's The Thing? Like this whole scene is great, it has an amazing practical effect in it, but as soon as you notice that sound, it almost sort of ruins the mood of it. You know, like how it ruins this violent and dark moment from a typically lighthearted character. When Gendo's voice cuts out here, that was actually due to an audio error in the original recording. The silence had a lot of weight to it with the interpretational aspect, so it was left in that way. Due to that, the English dub doesn't really hold the same weight, as it's delivered like a play script, where he's waiting to be cut off. Like it was written and delivered as, "The truth is... dash." I mean, honestly, this one's such a fucking nitpick. I actually do like Gendo's dub actor. By the way, the line blanked out is most likely, "I needed you." The lip movements match the Japanese for that, and Ritsuko types it on the computer during Instrumentality. She's also a character who throughout the entire show has had the motivation of wanting to be needed. Speaking of directorial decisions, the line "how disgusting" in the Japanese version actually comes from a place of real, well, disgust. Asuka's VA wasn't bringing the exact feeling Hideki Anno wanted to the table. So he described the scenario to her to the tune of, Miyamura.
Just imagine you are sleeping in your bed, and a stranger sneaks into your room.
He can rape you at any time as you're asleep.
But he doesn't. Instead, he masturbates, looking at you.
When you wake up and know what he did to you.
What do you think you would say?
Asuka's VA replied with a very genuine, which phrasing-wise has a broad interpretation, but the one with the most bite is "how disgusting." And that completely improvised, genuine take of her saying that is what made it into the film. I also heard some stuff about Anno actually making Shinji's actress choke Asuka's to the point where she was really crying, but I can't verify that one. So you see why I compare Hideki Anno to Stanley Kubrick? So yeah, fuck the dub. It hinders how immersed I can get in the film, and honestly, due to this, choosing to watch the movie dubbed or subbed feels like watching two completely different movies to me. So all this said about the old dub, I still feel indifferent to the new dub. The best comparison I could make is,
Watch out! You're gonna crash!
Oh no, oh god no, that's way too mean. I think Shinji's hospital scene actually came out pretty great. It genuinely gave me higher hopes for the dub going in. Overall, however, the quality control for it is all over the place. Sometimes the line reads are great, sometimes the line reads are not so great. It's more like Revenge of the Sith, you know, like a lot of very stoic, tonal acting with awkward delivery.
Senator Organa, my clone troops turned on me. I need help.
I have to destroy all of them, huh?
I entirely blame the direction and writing on this. The voice actors all have really good chops in other dub works, and it does sound like they're putting their hearts into their performances. But it also sounds like every other line read was a first take.
I'm going to turn you over to the Jedi Council.
The direct route to Cage 7 is good for another 3 minutes.
Like the most wooden possible read without any refinement for the enunciations of the words or their expression or the character, via the director just hearing them say it once and being like, okay, cut it, next. Or at least it feels that way. Some of the lines are way too verbose for the limited time they're given to say it.
Stop it! Crying won't fix any of your problems!
I'm actually sort of impressed she was able to get any emotion out of that in such a limited amount of time to say that long of a line. As well as dealing with a script that's so literal, it comes off as silly when read out loud in English. I don't care if Misato says fuck in the old dub, it adds punch when it's used in a limited capacity. This dude saying
Get over it!
instead of
Idiot!
takes away from the punch of the line. Even the Japanese voice actor says bugger with a hint of anger and impatience. And I don't think there's any possible way for Shinji saying Misato's a stranger to sound normal in English. It just sounds really weird.
You're just a stranger!
Okay, so humor me for a second. I can't really take this seriously when Shinji's voice is the equivalent to somebody making fun of somebody. You know where I'm coming from with this? Like when you're talking to somebody about like something someone did and you're like, oh, this guy was a total bitch to me. I was at a Dunkin' Donuts and I was like, hey man, do you have any hash browns? And he was like, we don't have any more hash browns! That's what it sounds like. It sounds like when you're making somebody sound stupid and annoying. Also, when Sele says, we will conquer evil with evil, got a genuine gut laugh out of me. Again, this is Revenge of the Sith tier.
You must realize you are doomed.
Good attempt, but it really could have benefited from a second draft or a second take from a lot of the voice actors, respectively. Oh, shit, I got a little sidetracked there. I just remembered that tangent about voice acting was meant to be a preface to this amazing cinematic experience. A cinematic experience being an experience where the acting, the animation, the cinematography, the editing, music, and sound design all come together to form that perfect cinematic journey. One that is immersive, exciting, and beautiful. All of which is the result of amazing direction. I already went over the voice acting and how the raw and amazing performances are able to bridge the language gap with their emotional passion, so I'd say that's an easy transition to talking about some post-production audio stuff. Half of which is only present in the Japanese version. For starters, the dialogue and sound effects mixing is both precise and atmospheric. In our first interior shot of Nerve, it sounds like we're in a huge vacuum, and the 3 bridge crew members talking are mixed off to the right speaker, their voices echoing through the solidarity of the room. Character voices being mapped to an audio channel complementary to their location in a room is actually a very common thing in both the movie and the show. This really makes us subtly feel like we're present in the room, and the result is super immersive. As far as sound effects go, there is an intense level of detail paid to both the subtle and the extreme. Gunshots, explosions, roars, punches, all sound awesome. Like, especially the mass production Avas. When they're all circling around Asuka, they sound like demons from hell that are simultaneously crying and laughing. And that sound somehow manages to get even more chilling when it's compressed through the Nerve computer speaker. Speaking of compression, once again, I love the way radio filters sound. Something about that filtering is just like so cool to me. But how about some love for the little details, like the viscous sounds of the IV drip sloshing about as it rattles, the phone dial tone beeping as it swings off the cord. When this can rolls away, it rolls away into the proper speaker, once again making us feel like we're really there. The sound effects are mixed with as much precision as the voices. Ava often edits the sound effects as well, like here where Misato's car blinkers are quietly ticking, signifying the editing rhythm. The cars racing by in the background signify when to cut to the next shot. And hey, speaking of editing, let's talk about some of the stronger edits of the film. This one is one of my favorites. Later in the film, after Ritsuko dies, we see some masterclass shit in the way of properly pacing the mourning of a character's loss with the reemergence into an amazing action scene. After Ritsuko's shot and falls into the sea of LCL, we cut to a smashed coffee mug. An object symbolic of herself, her stress, and her drive to always work to please Gendo. We hold in silence on the smashed mug for just the right amount of time before we're snapped back into the action by juxtaposing a cut with the sound of a ricochet. Similarly, with the whole cutting the sound thing, same as I explained in my last video about this show's editing, action and pacing is often in rhythm with music. Like here, the background music is building as we break down the situation. Once Fuyutsuki says, "Just as I thought," the guitar cues in, signifying that with the confirmed assessment of Seilei's plans, the stakes have been raised, and that his realization is very important. Sometimes character dialogue and sound effects can actually sub in for the scene's cutting momentum, similarly to some of the edits I mentioned earlier. When Maya shouts, "Why do they want Ava so badly?" we immediately cut to Misato explaining why. That is so on the nose, but it happens so fast that it does not in the slightest bit come off as hokey or jarring. There's often an ABC sort of rhythm with the pacing of the edits with movement. So as to keep our attention on a dialogue scene, we edit kind of like an action sequence, usually with a close-up of something that is in mid-motion, then easing to a calmer movement also in mid-motion, and then to a more relaxed shot as the characters continue to talk. This makes exposition come off as less boring, as deceptively it starts out edited like, well, an action scene. It happens in a really cool way during this scene where Misato's talking to Hyuga and Maya over the phone. Cut the sound and movement as she sweeps the bob of her ponytail off. Then a close-up of her walking, and then a wide shot that is as cool as it is sexy. Best girl. I also think it's kind of cool that her footsteps are in sync to the music here. The flow of revealing information through editing is done in a really cool way here, in this scene where the JSDF are invading Nerve. Like, the way this is done is so fucking smart that it feels like it has to be done by an editor who's working with existing footage. But nope, it's just the director who knows his shit.
Let me explain.
In the first shot, location is established, along with the sounds of off-screen footsteps and the building music. The subsequent shot shows us the source of the footsteps being the invasion force, and the final shot shows us a dead security guard, blood spilling over the Nerve insignia. To break all this down, first we get location, then we get the character of focus, and then we get that character's intent, to spill the blood of Nerve. Like, see what I mean? From the perspective of a director, a sequence of shots like this would normally be something done in hindsight, like by an editor, maybe with some smart location planning by a cinematographer. But here, it's just done by one director, who is extremely proficient in all the above. So while I was editing, I noticed something particularly fucking awesome in terms of scene transitions with, like, natural foreground objects and editing. So, like, watch this real quick when it swipes between panning through the woods to the soldier putting the phone down. Okay, now watch it again in slow motion. That is fucking butter. That is the editing equivalent to butter. The invasion of Nerve itself is super frantic. Cuts are fast between constant slaughter and brutality, and the soldiers come off as proficient and brutal while Nerve seems completely helpless. A few shots were actually taken from a war movie Anna was a fan of. Oh hey, that last tangent actually had a lot to do with cinematography. Let's transition into talking about cinematography now, with this shot. Now, rightfully so, a lot of people give credit to The Last Jedi for making us really care about this random rebel. But brother, I'ma do you one better. How about instead of a long sequence of events, just one shot that is barely 10 seconds long that makes you feel all of those exact same emotions. Now, before I go into why this works so well, I'd like to establish the principle of scene hierarchy. This basically means that by breaking a shot down into simple shapes and using natural lines, we can draw focus to an object. Also colors. When it comes to this, Jaws is king. In this scene, the predominant shape is that of Brody. Although the lines here aren't terribly gratuitous, we are using a very broad negative space, as well as placing less of a focus on the seemingly irrelevant chum. That is, until Jaws pops up and takes up almost the entirety of the shot with the mere size of her. We're looking at a wicked smart and super classy jump scare here, my dudes. Now, back to End of Eva, take what I said and apply it to this shot. Same as usual, our attention has been captured with a close-up that's mid-motion in keeping with Anno's cutting philosophy. The main focus in the subsequent shot is this woman dragging a dead guy's body, crying as she does it, very nearly towards the edge of the screen. The natural diagonal lines of the shot draw our attention down the hall to what seems like an inconsequential background detail of soldiers passing her by. Now, we can affirm three things here right away. The first is that we've only seen armed security personnel die up to this point. Armed men. This is an unarmed, crying woman, basically serving the position of a medic or a widow. Those being contextual things that we'd see as innocent and salvageable in a basic war situation. The second is that in her very slow trudge to stage left, she's almost out of the shot. If she actually escapes off screen, we have a mental idea that the vague stage left would actually be her salvation. And finally, there's the soldiers. Similar to the chum in Jaws, them running by her seems irrelevant. Amidst the chaos, they aren't focusing on her, and we aren't really focusing on them. Now, considering all the above, this unarmed, suffering woman should make it to the edge of the frame with her dead body here. The soldiers are ignoring her, and she's so close to being off screen, but oh, hello. This little shit just stopped. Thanks to perfect scene hierarchy, the soldiers never left our field of vision. Our attention is on her, but our peripheral was always on them. Again, same as Jaws. Then he shoots her. I actually feel so bad for this completely faceless, meaningless girl every time I see this movie. Like, they lay things out like she's going to have, like, almost a chance of making it, despite the fact that we never even see her face, and her pathetic situation makes it seem like she'd be such a worthless target, so... Like, this shot could totally just end with the soldiers continuing to pass her by. But nope, gotta make it merciless as possible. It's actually right after this where we see the scene of them burning someone alive off screen. Also a woman. In the Japanese. In the dub, it's Tarzan. Fun fact, psychologically, we as an audience actually feel a lot more empathy towards women and children due to caveman-like instincts. Also pets, because they cute. Interestingly, this movie makes use of a shaky cam juxtaposed by quickly cutting between close-ups. It's frantic as hell, but effectively so. A lot of modern filmgoers complain about the overuse of shaky cam, but in situations like these where it's used sparingly, it's, again, super effective. Also, can I just note that this is an animated film and it's making use of a live-action-esque shaky cam? When is the last time you've seen a traditionally animated film effectively make use of a shaky cam? Scenes with Misato and Shinji speaking to each other are often positioned very far away, particularly when Shinji's speaking. This is both done to convey the distance between them by literally showing the distance between them, as well as making us feel like an onlooker, like we're watching a family fight, and we should feel dirty for watching this happen. Like it is none of our business what this dysfunctional surrogate family does. The fisheye lens from an overhead angle is meant to create a sense of foreboding and dread, like the characters are powerless and unnerved at what they have to do. Misato's proud stance and focused, furious expression serves opposite to that, but then her voice complements it. There's a hint of hesitation, delay. She's our sense of hope and confidence. And also, it is wicked cool to see legitimate camera lenses taken into account for animation. Another aspect of cinematography is color grading and light lighting, which can be used to establish mood. One standout moment is when Misato is in this tech room in Nerve, everything is simplified to be green, red, and blue. Now, the blue and green tones are used to make the room look cold. But let's think complementary colors. Divergent to blue and green on the color wheel are orange and red, respectively. Therefore, all the light sources being red or reddish-orange draws our attention to that part of the screen, as well as making them look damn appealing. This is actually one of my favorite color combos. Likewise, in Misato's final goodbye to Shinji, the white light of the elevator contrasts the black of the room they're in, Shinji being saturated in white, as if he's ascending to a higher plane, while Misato is cast in darkness as death approaches. And the earlier discussed wide-shot composition theory is still ongoing. Like, again, this is still meant to be like us bearing witness to something awkward in like a different family that we aren't supposed to see. However, interestingly, in close-ups, shots of Shinji are shot from a higher angle. This is likely to show us that in his current state of mind, he's emotionally beneath us as an audience and should be looked down upon as pathetic. Whereas Misato's at eye level. We're on her side. We want her words to help him. And also because watching a limp-ass Shinji being slumped around to the point of her getting shot kind of fucking sucks. Man up, Shinji. I also wish Misato's final words to Shinji were more effective. We're literally getting a better therapy session than the actual last 2 episodes of the show's therapy session. Now, with their last goodbye, we once again see a perfect harmonization of editing and cinematography. Shinji steps back and flails into the elevator. As he does, we enter a slow-mo effect, and the Foley sounds die down. We cut to Misato basked in light as we zoom out. Hold, and then the door slams shut in front of her. The sound effects re-emerging with the door shutting. This sequence is paced fucking amazingly. And then Darling and the Franks just kinda stole it and took away any of the contextual weight it had. The fucking hacks. Also, do I really need to spell out that Misato, like with the heavenly glow around her over darkness, is meant to imply that she's gonna die? I'd like to add a note about Shinji's voice acting here. Hopefully without getting a copyright strike! When he slumps forward and cries, this isn't a regular, oh, I'm sad, my surrogate sister died kind of crying. This boy sounds like he's gonna fucking throw up. Also, to completely ruin the mood here, when Misato blows up, if you slow it down, you can see her body being shredded apart in the burst cloud. Oh, hey, this is an animated movie after all. Let me touch on animation. You know, like it's my job or something. Remember, guys, I'm an animator. Oh. Now, seeing as this is still Japanese animation, we're not going to get Disney-level fluidity, but the detail in the drawings is amazing, as well as the adherence to the 12 principles in such an effective and yet still cost-beneficial way. Like, drawing-wise, I always thought it was amazing how much effort they put into the detailing of the fleshier parts of the eye, as well as the eyelids around it. And also the gesture of the hands being so appealing and accurate. It's just great. Now, combining detail with amazing animation, guns are hard as shit to keep on model. Same with cars. But looky here, these incredibly talented Japanese fellas are just showing off. Now, without focusing on the amazing detail of the drawings, what really nails the fluidity and the movement of this is the timing and the spacing. Whew, okay. Time to explain what that means. Animation is normally done on 24 frames per second, meaning each second has 24 individual drawings in them. Japanese animation usually cuts this in half, choosing to draw every 3 or 4 frames instead of every single frame. This is able to work because 24 is divisible by 3 and 4. The end result spreads out evenly. Now that's timing. What spacing is essentially the definitive shape of each silhouette of each drawing. The spacing is the space between each of those drawings. To have each pose read really well as a key pose, idealistically you give them a very spacious silhouette compared to the prior frame. Well, gotta explain keyframes now, but that's easy. In animation, a key pose is the key position of movement. The breakdowns add character, precision, and depth to the movement. In-betweens are everything in between. Now, because I just laid out a bunch of technical shit with animation, watch this gun cocking again. Bearing in mind that this is using limited poses and only makes use of keys and breakdowns with little to no in-betweens. Now appreciate it in slow motion. This is smart as fuck, flows extremely well, and is the work of people who have mastered the art of movement. I'll say, how you like that bounce back on the top? That's squash and stretch, baby. But without actually squishing anything, though. You know, because a malleable pistol would look like super cartoony and break your immersion. You know, like the sound effects. The only exception being these nice-ass mirror frames meant to simulate motion blur. But how the fuck could I talk about animation in the End of Evangelion without even touching on the Asuka fight? Because remember when I said that this is one of the most well-done fights in all of animation ever? Here's why, bitch! Now, all that shit I built up about animation, cinematography, sound, and editing, that wasn't for nothing, as all of this is used in an amazingly effective full force here. For starters, mood lighting. This entire first shot takes place underwater because the sound of the ocean is super calming, and the blue tint to the whole shot makes it feel comforting, yet still cold. Like, literally cold, and also emotionally cold, which is almost contradictory to the fact that she's being bombed right now. However, these things with her whimpering voice and the camera slowly panning closer and closer to her, with her voice getting louder as we approach, fixates our anticipation and fear upon her. And right when we're starting to think hearing "I don't want to die" whispered into the mic is boring, we start to hear the voices in her head. Now, something that might not be clear here is she's actually not just remembering her mother, but the fact that her mother tried to kill her at a very young age. This is implied through the lines "die with me" and the sound of a young Asuka whimpering. If you've read the manga, they actually illustrate this, but likely take some creative liberties. As her insanity reaches its boiling point, we fast cut to a stuttering white with a lapse of disturbing images in her head. One of them actually being her dead corpse riddled with maggots. But next, something contradictorily pleasant happens. Her mother reaches out to her via the connection within the Eva, and Asuka comes to the realization that her mother never really grew distant from her, never abandoned her, never thought of her as a doll, because she was always there within her Eva, protecting her as an AT field. Now, something amazing about this fight is that similar to the shot of the gun I showed before, the timing and spacing is fucking perfect. There's also a really great use of the other 12 principles, most predominantly anticipation and arcs. Anticipation basically means what you assume it does, a split-second frame of action that builds to a reaction. Arcs basically mean the trajectory of the movement is done in a curve-like fashion, where the keys and the breakdown signify a more natural wave-like movement rather than a straight line between each key pose. Also, we have an extremely effective use of editing and shot choices to fully sell the scale and weight of the lumbering mass of Eva she's piloting, often cutting inside the cockpit to Asuka borderline struggling to get the Eva to lunge forward, which is then match cut to the outside of the Eva making that same movement. The camera often drags behind Unit 2 in the Eva series to give them a better sense of speed and force, as well as to really add to the extreme weight, like they're so fast and so heavy that our eye can't even follow it. We consistently cut to wide shots to give us a full sense of scale and perspective, then cut into close-ups of the ground being destroyed with the Eva smashing their feet into the earth. Also, oh my god, this shit is violent, and I love it! Quick note to further impress, this particular section of the fight is actually done with a straight-ahead animation method. Now usually, like I said, there are keys and breakdowns. An animator working pose to pose would draw each key and then each breakdown and then in between all those poses. Well, actually usually an intern or like a grunt man will in between all the poses and everything, but you know. But what's unique to straight ahead is that, like the name implies, the animator just drew every single pose as it happened, meaning no planning with the key poses. He just started drawing and let the flow of the movement be dictated strictly by how he felt. Something that really lends to the weight is the body language of Asuka. Her force of gravity is entirely centric to her upper body, her shoulders bearing into every single lunge and strike to such a strenuous extreme that everything else drags behind them, with the exception of shots where her head leans forward to scream. Her feet are firmly planted on the ground so as to concentrate all of her power onto her upper body's movements, her hair loosely swinging behind her every time she gets knocked around. Now, before we get back to the fight, I'd like to quickly talk about Seilei's intentions. Some people might find their plans confusing, but that's because they're not inherently evil. The violent retaliation against Nerve and Asuka isn't necessarily them trying to be as cruel as possible, it's them doing what they feel is necessary, to put Nerve back in its place, and also to stop Gendo from realizing his own form of their plan, Instrumentality, before they do. For starters, they initially just tried hacking into Nerve. This means they can preserve the Magi as a monument to humanity's existence similar to Yui in Unit 1. It also would have granted them full control over the Nerve headquarters, meaning they could have enacted their plan however they wanted. The JSDF invasion was actually caused by them lying to the Japanese government and telling them that Nerve was planning Instrumentality instead of Seilei. Thus, to the Japanese government, an entire genocide of the whole world should be met with extreme force. And the combat usage of the mass production Evas was something they never really wanted to do, so they had to drop them in before Unit 1 arrived to take care of her, at the risk of sacrificing a few. So again, it was never to be violent or inflict as much cruelty as possible, they even say this, but they're insane and are after the next stage of human evolution, doing everything within their power to obtain it before Gendo can. Okay, back to the fight again. I just wanted to clear that up because I've heard people call this shit a plot hole and that's fucking stupid. And oh fuck, her scream is already chilling, but then you add the beep of the battery dying on top of that and it's legitimately horrifying. Although a genuine complaint I have about this movie is that I think it's odd that Maya's almost vomiting from the side of a computer monitor. The idea is that she's supposed to be reacting to what we as an audience are seeing because she's meant to be our vessel, but in context she's basically seeing Half-Life 2.exe as stop responding over and over again. Ugh, actually, I'd vomit too if I saw that. But speaking of gross, Unit 2 jeering its eye up onto the impaled lance is fucking cringe-inducing just from the sight of it. I love that I hate it. Also, this shot of Asuka reaching up into the sky is definitely meant to parallel the image of Adam reaching up to God. Symbolically, there is the obvious Catholic symbolism, half of which is aesthetic. The other half is aesthetic, with loose implications. Like Shinji holding onto a cross necklace isn't him holding onto God, it's him holding onto Misato. And like, yeah, look at that, guys, Shinji's sitting in parking space 666, implying he's the devil. But let's just ignore the Catholic symbolism for a second, like seriously dude. How about instead we analyze the meaning behind a few of these here shots real quick. Like here in the opening, to an unattentive viewer this might seem like a very odd start to the film, but let's break it down. First of all, he's standing by the lake where he met Kaoru, as well as the location where Rei's Eva self-destructed. Now on the one hand we can interpret this as Shinji thinking about the past and about those he cared about and lost, and probably about how it was all his fault. But in a very subtle way, this serves as a rhyming thematic beat to a later section of the movie, where Shinji's standing over the Sea of LCL and speaking to Kaoru and Rei. Much like he is now standing over the lake where Rei perished and where he met Kaoru, this is meant to subtly symbolize that his thoughts dwell on them. And if that idea didn't sink in, the bucket plopping into the water is a literal rhyming shot to when Shinji popped Kaoru's head off. Myself, among many other people, read Shinji's wet hair and soaked clothing as being indicative of a suicide attempt, like he was in such a low state of mind that to reunite with Kaoru, he considered drowning himself, an ideology further enhanced by shots in episode 4 that are meant to imply Shinji is contemplating suicide, even further enhanced by the fact that in episode 16 or 18, I don't remember exactly which one, we find out Shinji can't swim. However, Ava Geeks user, I Am Bounty Hunter, speaks Japanese, and owns a storyboard book from the End of Evangelion. So he's able to both show and tell us that this suicide speculation is us overextending as philosophers. A note is clearly made in the storyboards next to the liquid on Shinji that this is sweat, and is not to be mistaken for any other liquid. The shot is still very powerful and super indicative of his inactions, as it shows he just stood here by the lake since episode 24, just thinking, just standing here, doing nothing, thinking. Even when it's so hot and humid that he's practically swimming in the air, he just stands there, almost completely dead inside. The sequence of Misato saying her farewell to Shinji is another instance of rhyming themes, less cut and dry this time. But the final sequence of her goodbye closely mirrors when Misato's dad saved Misato's life with his final and weak goodbye. Credit to Matthew Lugo there, I didn't actually make this connection myself at first. In this shot, we deliberately avoid showing Gendo's face, as in this moment he's completely stoic. He feels no emotion or pity for all the other people currently being slaughtered. He only cares for his objective, which he'd happily sacrifice everything for. Flip of the coin, it's pretty funny that if you look closely you can see the mass production Eva squishing a soldier helping his buddy up. But then again, if we step back and look at this from the perspective of visual symbolism, this actually establishes a very clear sense of power. Asuka having dispatched the JSTF with relative ease, the scale of the mass production Eva juxtaposed with it literally clobbering her previous opponent with its strength and size, shows us that this fight isn't going to be easy. These two are sort of editing-centric symbolism. Similar to the bucket plopping into the water being representative of what Shinji tried to do, on the line, the will of she who chose to remain within Eva, it cuts to Rei. Rei being the only living link to Yui Ikari, this is supposed to not so much imply that it's her own will within the Eva, but the will of her own original body, Yui. It can also be affirmed that Gendo is thinking about Rei from this cut. The same way Gendo's destroyed glasses represent Rei's feelings towards him. Same kind of cutting implication happens when Shinji's lying in bed. As he sits here, we suddenly cut back to the explosion site, implying he's thinking about Rei, and about companionship. Now to go back to talking about editing again without the use of symbolism, the sound cutting out once Shinji sees Asuka's mangled and devoured corpse is done perfectly, only cutting back into the sound of his voice, gasping, and then to him screaming. The wind building up as we get further and further away until it eventually overpowers the very sound of his voice. The use of limited sound here really makes this moment sink in and feel super chilling, until we get the credits, which are in the middle of the movie. Why? Because this is our intermission, you silly little bitch. Take some time to piss, and talk to your friends about what you just saw. It also allows the movie to cut the silence and then end abruptly at the end, which is very striking and punchy. Again with the Kubrickian aspect, this feels like Anno doing an homage to 2001 A Space Odyssey. I actually had the benefit of seeing a 75mm remake of Space Odyssey in theaters, and basically had that same experience. Left the theater, took a piss, and then prepared for the mindfuck of a second half this movie had in store for us. Same thing with Eva, as the second half of this movie is an amazing introspective journey into Shinji's psyche. Oh yeah. Shinji. I think it's time we discuss our objectively awful hero. Yes, objectively. Absolutely objectively. As a hero, Shinji completely sucks. But as a protagonist, he's fascinating. He's sort of similar to Shoya, Bill, Matt, and maybe not Perry. But he's similar to all of them in that he's not exactly heroic. Not in a traditional sense, and at the same time he's a character we're supposed to relate to and project ourselves onto. If you don't know who the other characters I just named are, watch my other fucking videos, you bastard. Now, anybody with a high school diploma that's forced to analyze stuff like Catcher in the Rye could easily tell you that prior definition of Shinji. But let's actually take a look at his overall character arc as a hero. Now, typically, the ideal protagonist will start as wide-eyed, naive, and maybe a little bit whiny, maybe a little bit cocky, but they get their shit kicked in a few times for being too cocky, train, and then come back stronger than ever. It's a time-tested tale that if done well enough, everyone can enjoy. The experience of Rocky, Luke, Simone, Deku, the list goes on. Evangelion is unique in being a deconstruction of the typical mecha anime, which revels in this sort of character arc. If we actually look at Shinji's character progression, he starts off pretty damn low. He gets a very mild improvement, and then he kind of pitters out for the majority of the show. He's a fairly competent pilot. He has friends. And it seems like he has the approval of his father. He's happy. But in episode 16, he gets told he's cool and he decides to overextend. And he ends up getting his shit wrecked for aiming higher than he's actually capable of. And now with no other option, he's left to die. Only able to survive because his will to live and see everyone else again was able to awaken the strength of Unit 1. This is also my favorite episode. It's interesting because in any other show, this would be the setup for him to now come back stronger than ever. He's had his shit wrecked, and a conventional character arc tells us he'll train to get stronger. Nope, he's still pretty stagnant. Only difference is that now he's been put in his place. When an infected Eva unit comes face to face with him, Shinji chooses to die over having to take the life of its pilot. Another kid. Another human kid. Just like him. Request refused. His father activates a failsafe mode that brutally incapacitates that Eva, the pilot turning out to be his friend Toji. Furious from that, Shinji rebels against his father, deciding he should have never allowed himself to submit to him to begin with. Until later in the episode, an angel attack has Wayne nerfed down to a completely defenseless position. Kaji finally lays it out to Shinji that under no uncertain terms, that angel's gonna roll into Nerve, make contact with Lilith, and cause third impact, killing everyone. Fuck that! Shinji charges back the Nerve, yells at his dad, and clocks that bitch. And hell, he's doing super well. We're starting to see a result of that character arc. Hey, look, he's almost taking an adrenal pleasure from it. That's our little sadist. Oh shit, his battery died. That's okay though, you're piloting a vicious monster and it's gonna fucking eat the angel that tried to kill you. In the next two altercations, Shinji's not actually allowed to fight due to this. Having the DNA of both Lilith and Adam in it, Unit 1 is too valuable. Asuka's allowed to be mentally raped and traumatized, Shinji not even being permitted to help. Rei is pushed to the brink of a straight-up fusion with an angel until Shinji's allowed to do all he can. And considering all he can includes shoot it, punch it, or stab it, he exhausted all of his possibilities pretty quickly. Rei instead decides to take the angel into herself and then kill herself with it inside of her. Did I mention that Misato's cracking under trauma right now? She projected her father onto her former lover Kaji.
He's dead now.
So she's ended up creating a very large distance between herself and everyone but this one colleague who's giving her information because he low-key wants to fuck her. AKA Misato's actually sort of manipulating him. So Rei's dead, well the Rei Shinji knew is dead and replaced by a soulless husk. Toji's in the hospital, and Shinji's not on speaking terms with the other kids at his school because of that. Asuka's dead inside, because without Eva she feels worthless. Shinji realized a lot of things about Misato he doesn't like, and now she's kind of scaring him. And it's in this extreme loneliness and isolation that Shinji meets Kaoru, someone who loves him unconditionally. Sorry dude, he's an angel, gonna have to pop his head off. I feel a strong message here throughout the entire show is that of indecisiveness and being inactive. Shinji never really pushes himself to greatly improve, nor is he able to think or act very much on his own volition. This isn't completely his fault, as he's practically never allowed to, almost constantly being pressured or forced into doing what other people want him to do. But there are several moments where Shinji sacrifices what he really wants to do in favor of what he thinks he needs to do. He's trying to fulfill a hero role that he is nearly incapable of fulfilling. So suffice to say, at this point, with how frequently he's been hurt by people, he doesn't really like people. He welcomes death. He wishes to return to nothingness. Fuck life. Fuck my dad. Fuck making friends. I tried, damn it. I can't find happiness. I do terrible things to people. I just deserve to die. Just let me die. But he's too indecisive and too scared to kill himself. He seeks solace in a comatose Asuka. This won't give him anything. And what might seem to the audience as a traditionally heartwarming scene is actually one of selfishness and desire. Asuka needs to live for the narcissistic benefit of Shinji's. As a human being, she doesn't truly matter to him anymore. He's just looking for someone to help him, to give him a reason to live. And after accidentally revealing her breast, he's driven to instinct and pleasures himself in an extremely vapid, selfish, and disgusting act. To say I'm so fucked up is an understatement. To call him a hero would be a lie. But unfortunately, to call him sympathetic, even through all this, is a bitter truth. Sympathetic, not empathetic. I want to really stress that. Empathy would be really fucked up here. Asuka's unresponsive, devoid. She's a mere representation of a relationship with a human being. A jail brew or Rule 34 search away from an absolutely useless and futile feeling. A wasteful and passionless act. This isn't the same Shinji we followed in the show anymore. This isn't the hopeful protagonist who embodies the lowest points of humanity, making him inherently empathetic. We've witnessed the formation of a sociopath, very much akin to his father. Very, very much akin to his father. And the movie's almost shaming us for daring to relate to the depraved behavior Shinji is exhibiting. Because all of you disgusting, shut-in, nerd-ass otaku who masturbate to images of a 14-year-old girl are just as bad as this piece of shit seeking some form of human connection from something he'll never get it back from. JK, dude, he jerked off. It's wicked funny because I'm like 13 and shit. You want to go watch the Cat in the Hat movie?
I've been masturbating to hentai because I'm lonely and unable to connect with real people.
Gross.
I should also note this is what Anno's trying to say, not me. This is our hero. This is someone who's given up on life because life seems deliberately written to knock him down at every turn. In Shinji's case, it pretty much is. Seilei's ancient inscriptions, the Dead Sea Scrolls, require a very specific sequence of events to actualize their plan. And whilst piloting a medium between God and humanity, Shinji is able to decide the fate of humanity. His wish, in a world where no one understands him, is shit to him. A world where he really never understood anything himself. He longed for a world without pain, without uncertainty, by escaping to the comforts of Kaoru and Rei, always expecting everybody to feel the same way he does. He feels betrayed, like they betrayed his feelings. And yet, in truth, he misunderstood all of them from the beginning. He only believed what he wanted to believe. But in his rationale, nobody wants him. So they can all just die. Nobody cares whether or not he exists. Nothing ever changes. So they can all just die. It would be better if he never existed. He should just die too. Is it okay for him to be here? If all of that was true, then what would his hand be for? What would his heart be for? Why would he exist and be able to feel emotion and impact the emotions of others if the world is just nothing? If he's just gone? And yet still, all he can rationalize at this point boils down to fuck this world. Fuck everyone. I want to die and take all of them with me. I'm not verbatim quoting the movie here, but almost all of what I just said is exchanged between Shinji and Rei before he wishes for everyone to return to nothing, for the Earth to reset. This is our protagonist, and he is the embodiment of every single aspect of yourself. Yes, yourself, that you've decided to change for the benefit of yourself. And for that reason, seeing an extremely shitty version of you kind of fucking sucks. And Shinji kind of fucking sucks. Hell, maybe he's even a reflection of you. Maybe you spent the whole show calling him relatable until you hit End of Eva. Don't be like this. Don't be like Shinji. Just because things get hard doesn't mean you have the right to throw it all away. Because even though you might have it rough and have given up on life, that barrier of life that is your physical form is what makes you unique, and you should work to the betterment of yourself for the sake of your own happiness and no one else's. Or else you'll find yourself washed along in a sea of souls, giving in to desire and drifting aimlessly, only to then be washed up onto an empty beach by the very same sea, alone, left only with the manifestations of those that antagonized you, haunted by your pessimism. But no matter what you do, you're still too pathetic to take action against them. Like, fuck dude, you probably should have just started by like, I don't know, talking to her. Like, I know she was a complete bitch to you, but like, come on, one step at a time, aight? So going back to the whole character arc thing, how does it feel to be back at square one? Only now square one is in a negative fucking integer. Well, depending on the person, it's either sad, annoying, or confusing. And that's the main reason why Shinji, I mean Evangelion, is so polarizing. It's this poor fucking kid who can't do anything right because God literally hates him. And that's about half the message that End of Eva is trying to convey. But is this truly a sad, bleak, nihilistic ending? Does Shinji never learn? Well, with all of this in mind, let's discuss the second half of the movie and how Instrumentality impacts him. We could say how Instrumentality 3rd impacts him. Fuck!
I'm the bad guy?
Yeah.
How'd that happen? I did everything they told me to. Did you know I
Pilot Evangelion?
Yeah.
I helped to protect
The world. When analyzing a film, especially one as artistic as The End of Evangelion, something extremely important is subtext, thematic parallels, and unique to End of Eva, human psychology. When I was about 10, I was way into Star Wars, and by extension, George Lucas as a director. I made it an objective to watch and obsess over everything he had done. This included the student film, THX 1138 4EB, which is a fucking mouthful, and also the feature-length film that was made based upon it. Now, when I was younger, I took everything this movie at face value. So as a 10-year-old, if you asked me, I'd say this is a movie about Robert Duvall breaking an anti-sex law in a world where everybody's sedated and bald, and then having to escape that world under the threat of incarceration. Well, I didn't know the word incarceration when I was 10, but how'd you like that one? But upon reevaluation, looking deeper into it, this movie is as much of a critique and caricature of 70s capitalist American consumerism as 1984 is to the Stalin era of communist totalitarianism. The economy functions off of buying useless crap they think they need to buy that really has no practical use, so they're immediately disposed of once they buy it. Cycle repeats, and the big corporations keep getting money. Mind-numbing drugs are standardized to squash individuality and rational thought, a hyperbolic idea of how we use Ritalin on children, or at least that's how I felt when I was on it. Religion is a series of useless pre-recorded messages that say nice things but don't actually mean anything or help anything, ending each sermon by saying that giving money to a corporation will make you happier. They literally build the dysfunctional robot police that oppress them. Likewise, The End of Evangelion on the surface level is a cool film about the apocalypse. I'd even go as far as to say this is a badass, masterfully crafted film about the apocalypse, if my video about the first half didn't make that perfectly clear. But on a much deeper level, the overall idea of this is one of a very cynical and bleak message about learning to love yourself at the risk of losing everything and leaving your world in ruin. The show, Neon Genesis Evangelion, showed us Shinji's introspections during Instrumentality, using similar beats of escapism, choice, and self-love. His conclusion is cut and dry. He wants to live, and he pictures all of humanity, all the people he's known, as accepting him and cheering him on for this development. Did they really? Well, we can assume Shinji in the show has realized his opinion of himself means much more than the opinions of other people, so he doesn't really care. All that matters is that he learned to not let himself be defined by how greatly other people value him and what other people think of him, but rather by what he thinks of himself, with the full knowledge that he can and will love himself. I think, therefore I am. Thank you all. However, the movie, The End of Evangelion, takes on a much more aggressive approach to all these themes. It shows him liquefying the entire human race due to a near sociopathic inability to understand other people's emotions. He masturbates to Asuka's comatose body, projects her and Rei onto dolls. He strangles Asuka for rejecting him in a fit of blind, uncontrollable rage, only to realize all too late that he can accept himself as a human being and wants to keep trying to live, even if that means he's left all alone with no one but the one person who represents how cruel humanity can be towards him. With a special thank you to the staff, Anno's companions, and a unique shout out to the lead voice actresses, the second half of this film, and likewise the video essay we're watching right now, truly begins. We are gonna go full-blown human psychological analysis here, so buckle up, my dudes! Actually, first let me mention something aesthetic. Rei's severed arm with protruding veins and tendons are fucking disgusting. For the film to then one-up itself by having Gendo sink his hand into Rei's body via her most vulnerable part, her breasts, is crazy, man. This also acts as a callback to when Shinji first groped her earlier on. However, her reaction here to even the initial contact is much different than her one before, subtly cueing us in on a character progression within Rei. With Shinji before, she didn't care, and likewise she used to show a genuine affection for Gendo, who she no longer cares for as symbolized by his broken glasses. Gendo wishes to become a god and reunite with his former lover by whatever means necessary, even if it means molesting children. Ugh. Another directorial note, I think it's really cool that space is dead silent outside of vibrations. That's something I've really only seen done in Akira and Space Odyssey outside of this. I know the movie Gravity does this too, but I haven't seen it. Likewise, I really like that Lilith isn't actually given a voice. She's merely left as this 1920s style text still. The brilliance in this is that her voice is the viewer's own unique interpretation. She's a god, and we cannot begin to fathom what a god would even sound like, or hell, if it would even speak our language. Not to mention, giving Lilith a voice would probably end up being super corny. Now let's examine this shot of Shinji's hand real quick. Shinji's hand is a consistent symbol throughout the anime. Your hand is a tool with which to protect others. Your hand is a tool with which to protect yourself. An instrument of revenge, a token of friendship, a symbol of personal strength and determination, a tool of lust. It's a means of harm, it's a medium to the unknown. Your hand has the power to end a life. Your hand has the power to commit actions even worse than taking one's life. Your hand has the overwhelming power to determine your fate, hold on to the past, and wield the fate of others. But above all else, your hand is the means of which you can act. Your hand and your individuality is your humanity. The ability to reach out to others as they reach out to you, although not a unique strength, is a powerful one. And it's the actions you choose to take with your hands, with your life, that determine yourself and the perception of those around you. This movie's ultimate message is one of learning to accept yourself, to learn to cope with suffering and loss, to grow up and mature. This is your strength. No one else is you. No one else can be you. No one else can live for you. This is your life, and you deserve to live it to its fullest, even if you're someone as pathetic, filthy, and disgusting as Shinji. Now, the unique meaning behind this particular use of visual callback is that he's helpless. He's wondering what to do. He's failed entirely, and it's completely his fault. Therefore, he's actually hiding himself away within his own source of power. What else can he do? Just be a fucking ostrich, dude. Actually, that's not true. Ostriches don't really stick their heads on the ground, they play dead. No matter what he does in this moment, the force acting against him is too great. He is completely powerless before God. Another symbolic image from this half I love is the shot of Gendo completely beneath Lilith. Contrary to literally every other time Rey and Gendo were seen on screen, Rey is now above Gendo, completely towering over him. Whereas before she was beneath him, and shot as being below him, she has now ascended, and he's become insignificant to her, worth hardly anything more than the same restrictive mask that limited Lilith's power. And Jesus, man, did I hammer it in that you should be watching this subject? Cause goddamn, man, her breathing here is really scary and chilling. I love it. With Rey's depiction here, we're now twisting the symbol of the waifu. Rey being the symbol of the perfect subservient Japanese woman, falsified dreams, lust, and desire have now manifested into something abnormal, disgusting, toxic, and mangled. But hey, Kairu's here, so it looks like Gay's the way. In all seriousness, Shinji is lowering his guard to him because he was the only other one who ever remained unconditionally nice to him. In keeping with the idealized human, Kairu is the perfect friend or boyfriend. You're always great. You're the only person I care about. I'll never hurt you and always support you. Like Rey, this is a metaphor for escapism into the unattainable for Shinji, who's someone no longer willing to face reality and the cruelty of it. Also, just to clear this up in case she missed it before, Kaoru is able to be here because Gendo's hand had Adam in it. Rey's stomach ate Gendo's hand, and Adam has the same genetics as Kaoru. Look at that. The perfect girlfriend, friend, and boyfriend, all in one absolutely godlike massive package. Goddamn, dude, hope you're in the Giants. Now you see, the Geofront was the egg of Lilith, and the original birthplace of humanity, which is in Japan because nationalism. Now it's up to Shinji, as the human soul within Unit 1, the medium between God and humanity, to determine our fates, and whether or not we'll return to our initial birthplace as festering primordial soup. Or just tang. The giant god being places him into a state of ecstasy once Kaoru lowers his guard, which from the looks of it is likely done by showing him titties. Nobody knows for sure whose titties, but them some good titties. AvaGeeks writer Felipe Fritzk, I hope I pronounced that right, referred to an accepted idea that Instrumentality actually started right when Shinji saw those boobs. Thus, Shinji is Instrumentality's first victim, while also standing in as the deciding factor as to what will become of the rest of the world. Okay, so this sequence is absolutely loaded with visual symbolism, so I'm going to attempt to break this down the best I can. Now for starters, there's the use of stage lights and this undertone of hokey-ass music that sounds like it's coming out of a really old TV speaker. Shinji's entire life feels like it's been placed on a stage before an audience, both literally and contextually. It's contextual because the Dead Sea Scrolls have acted as a straight-up guideline as to how Nerve manipulates Shinji for the ideal outcome of Instrumentality. There's actually just a dude watching him in one shot that you likely don't even notice until he slides away. So you see, contextually, Shinji was always under surveillance during the show. He's interacting with dolls here, the two of which are meant to take on a similar role to Rei and Asuka in his head. Asuka has always been someone who greatly struggled with valuing her individuality, and tries to distance herself from being a doll as much as possible. We've already been over Rei as the idealized Japanese woman, so I won't repeat myself. We only need to realize that Shinji doesn't really value those two girls as people, just as objects. I'll go into that more. The woman here, who looks a lot like Misato, is representative of Nerve, and comes to take them both away from him. Kinda like how at the tail end of the show the Evas end up being Asuka and Rei's undoing, and also to kind of hammer in the sadness of Shinji being all alone. He wishes he had a mom, and he wishes someone would come to take him home, but he has no one. He's just stuck here at the playground by himself now, with no real bonds. Now once again taking some mind to our setting, the entire thing looks like a woman lying down. This could be perceived as a few different things, one of them being that women are a source of escapism for Shinji, so right now he's retreating to pleasure to oust the pain. It could also show immaturity, however, being a visual show of his desire for the affection of his dead mother, and likewise a desire for a simpler time when she was always looking over him. That said, it could also literally be seen as the Eva he's piloting, seeing as Unit 1 has the soul of his mother and he's within it much like he's within this busty playground. Now I don't think I need to say the sandcastle is supposed to be Nerve, but what I will say are his actions against it are sort of meant to parallel his call to duty, like his consistent one, and also the one at the very start of the show. Thinking back, when he's first beckoned to Nerve by his father, it's implied he tore up the letter and then taped it back together. He likely had a furious reaction to it initially like he did with the sandcastle, but because he's weak and desires a feeling of companionship and being wanted, he rebuilds it, the same way he taped the letter together, the same way he constantly returns to Nerve despite how much it hurts him. Being a part of Nerve and piloting Eva is what's expected of him, and he'll continue to do what's expected of him. This might be a bit of a pull, but it's actually a lot like having to grow up and get a job. You know, you're being kicked out of your house, accepting responsibility, and moving on. You gotta impress your parents, kid, you gotta earn their affection, you gotta earn their love. That pressure is societal, and I guess that makes Shinji a millennial. He sees Misato as unrelatable and disgusting, impure. She has sex, she drinks, she's been sullied, and cannot parallel his escapist fantasies of the pure, perfect woman. She will never be his doll. Asuka and Rei can, but they both terrify him. Social interaction terrifies him. Asuka's shown to be much more extreme in this sequence, as this is how Shinji sees her, as a rampant beast, but a very immature one, paralleled via crayon drawings to visually convey the childishness of all this. Also, as a side note, these children's drawings were actually therapeutic drawings from real children who were victims of trauma or abuse. That's why a lot of them look so sadistic and horrifying. They're done by children who are mentally immature that are venting via art. You know, kind of like the latter half of Evangelion is for Anno. This very sequence of still images drawn by children actually occurs directly after Shinji strangles Asuka later on, and also in brief intervals during Asuka's mind rape in episode 22. I will come back to this. In general, his thoughts of Asuka tend to fixate on the sexual parts of her while she's speaking. Shinji deeply hides his emotions and feelings behind the veil of a stoic expression, when deep down he's experiencing an overwhelming amount of suffering that all stays bottled up inside of him. His father did the same, once behind an apathetic but cocky smirk and later behind his crossed hands, as well as a pair of sweet-ass sunglasses. Shinji has an awareness of all of his shortcomings as a human being, but he blames the world and other people for all this. For being like him and hiding their feelings behind a mask, a smile. He's angry at them and at the world for not being tailor-made specifically for his wants and desires. But despite everything, despite how much it hurts him to be around people and to interact with them, he can't bear the thought of being left alone. He needs them. He needs their help. All those times in his life he's reached out to these people, practically begging them, only to be pushed away, to be hurt, to be burned further. Deep down, Shinji buries a burning desire to hurt all of them for this. Although projecting an air of pacifism, he's a man. He's an animal. These cruel people deserve to be punished for not being his perfect dolls. They deserve it for not saying exactly what he wants them to say when he pulls their strings. I think what's very important here is the Asuka we see is symbolically representative of humanity. She's meant to parallel Shinji's constant battle of thinking that acting selfless and pretending to be heroic validates their affection towards him, and how that only results in him suffering more and more when he opens up to them. This is what his whole life has been. This isn't just him and Asuka. and now he wants all of them to suffer for making him suffer, literally echoing the opening sequence of him masturbating to Asuka. He reaches out to someone who will never reciprocate his feelings, trying to force himself onto them, only for the rejection to result in him doing something absolutely abhorrent to them out of a blind impulse. Asuka chastises him for running away to her, trying to act like a hero and pretending to care about her, when in reality he's only pretending to care about her to give her a reason to care about him. She feels like he's playing a very manipulative, sociopathic game with her, emotionally. And the killing blow to all of this is the word no. When we built up that Shinji hates people hiding from him, hiding their feelings, tiptoeing around the subject, abandoning him, he finally got a conclusive answer. And it's a cold, hard rejection. No. That's not what he wants. Directorially, it's brilliant how before he actually goes for the choke, all of the sound has stopped, letting us sit there and stew on the anticipation. Him sneering through his clenched teeth cuts through the room like a knife. At the start of the movie, Shinji sought Asuka's help and did something horrible to her. Now here we are, at the start of the second half, with him seeking her help and doing something horrible to her. And the fact that it's all taking place in his head is the only reason this physical retaliation is possible. For Shinji as a physical human being, strangling Asuka is out of character. I mean, he would have done it long ago if it was in character, let's be real. But again, we're in his head. These are his desires. And all this time, all he's wanted to do was lash out and retaliate against all the people who hurt him and made him suffer. Like Ritsuko's mother when she's strangling the young Rei, the truth hurts. And sometimes we hurt the people that are truly just trying to help us with their honesty, because of how much we deny those very truths. And now, we can discuss the use of the children's drawings. The fact that these are therapy drawings from children who were abuse victims. The fact that they immediately followed Shinji strangling Asuka, a sequence which in itself echoes the beats of the hospital scene, and the usage of them echoes the scene of Asuka being mentally raped. I don't think there's any other conclusion to draw other than in this sequence, based off of these parallels to the show, to the origins of the art, and to the parallel between the opening scene, Shinji is an abuser in this instance. He is, in no uncertain terms, currently at his absolute lowest point. To offer a bit of leverage, in episode 22, these occur when Asuka's venting about an underlying affection towards Shinji. They are art therapy drawings done by real children, but we can also see these in-universe as Asuka's childhood art therapy. But even when offering that leverage, I circle back around to them being juxtaposed with a strangulation, and then consider the idea that her feelings towards Shinji make her feel slightly violated. Thereby, the Shinji is an abuser conclusion still stands for me, as from Asuka's perspective, it was formerly a one-sided emotional abuse stemmed from misunderstanding that has now been projected as physical abuse via Shinji. But then let's consider that these are therapy drawings, and tie that into the parallel it draws to Shinji's animalistic pleasure in tearing Zeruyel's face off. In that instance, it was him enacting a righteous and brutal justice onto the source of his torment, the angels, taking pleasure from it because it was something he always longed to do. A manifestation of his rage stemming from how much his call to duty emotionally cripples him. We can affirm a similar conclusion from this sequence. Once again, not specifically towards Asuka, towards humanity, for constantly rejecting him no matter how hard he tries. He no longer pines for their empathy. He currently longs for their retribution. It's instinctive. It's impulsive. It's human. And finally, there's the parallel to the dummy system snapping Unit 3's neck. This is something that Shinji had no control over. So I think we can see this strangulation, which is shown in the exact same pose, in a very similar light. It's more of an impulsive decision than a conscientious decision. He's fed up at this point, even if he doesn't outwardly express it outside of this impulsive gesture. Fuck life and fuck people. And look at this, it's a series of sequences that show every time she turned away from him, rejecting him, slamming doors in his face. After being treated like that for so long, for seemingly no reason, wouldn't you be the least bit upset as well? We no longer see Shinji, we're now seeing the transformation of Gendo, the natural conclusion of Shinji's darkest possible path. A man who was once very much like Shinji, self-admittedly. He says he saw himself in Shinji. Shinji has become a nihilist veering into the full path of sociopathy like his father. Y'all should Google the lyrics for Calm Scissor Todd sometime. If you aren't giving them your full mind during the movie, and I don't blame you, this is a way better summary of Shinji's character than the actual opening to Eva is. And hell, maybe a little bit of Anno considering his mental state during the latter production of Neon Genesis. Actually, the first draft of this song was indeed written by Anno. In Instrumentality, the object of your desires brings you to your finality. It's broadly represented as Rei, as she's representative of Lilith. For specifics, Hyuga gets Misato, Shinji gets Karu, Fuyutsuki and Gendo get Yui, Maya gets Ritsuko. This guy's a unique case. They never actually show him connecting with anyone emotionally in the show. I initially concluded that this guy's many Reis represented the world accepting him for being who he is being an aspiring musician and rock star. I like that interpretation still, but many people corrected me in saying that this was actually him rejecting Instrumentality, because he fears it. I mean, he is screaming. Misato called the apparition of Rei Kaji, so we know what she saw. But we don't know what Ritsuko saw. I actually think we could take this literally, as in she just saw Rei. Like her work with Ava was of greater value to her than any human connection. The soldiers all had smiles on their faces earlier on too, embracing death. So I guess they saw their own apparitions as well before Instrumentality kicked off in full. Now I know I just alluded to Gendo seeing Yui, but bit of a cockblock, Gendo's actually barred from Instrumentality for being a cruel person, never forming bonds with anyone beyond Yui and by extension Rei. For doing this and for causing the most intense suffering of all to those who drew close to him. He's just a worst-case scenario of Shinji, who until End of Eva was actively trying to form connections. Gendo found his waifu. She cared for him and took care of him, loved him even through his faults, but when she was taken from him, he refused to move on. Until his own death, he formed a toxic connection with a being no longer amongst this world, and severing the ties with all those tangible ones, even down to his own son. And if it wasn't clear already, that abandonment really fucked Shinji up. Gendo's blood is left red, unlike the others who merged with Lilith and the Black Egg. Even those earlier on with red blood had it fade to orange. Seele said he deserves death earlier in the film, and Gendo calls this fate his retribution. Some have argued that he's not barred, but rather just given a very painful entry, potentially merging with Yui within the Eva. I completely understand this perspective, but I prefer to see this as a true retribution, a warning on top of a warning. The horrid potential conclusion of Shinji, Gendo, is being punished for being so horrid to people, for being so horrid to humanity. You should never respect or aspire to this, or else you'll be like him and be condemned to a fate of isolation after an entire lifetime of isolation. That is fucking powerful. Ooh, okay, sound design note. I can actually hear the lances shredding into the surround speakers while Rei stabs herself in utter bliss of this penetration. When this pan shot happens, we can see Shinji's head on Rei. No comment. Half the lines of dialogue here are from the show. The other half seem like quotes from Anno's personal experiences, of things he's heard where people he's reached out to have chastised him and pushed him away. Perhaps even a few personal feelings are mixed in here, things he felt people wanted to say but never could directly. The noises heard here are those ubiquitous with Shinji, as well as Anno himself. The sounds of people, of crowds, the ambience of cars, sirens, the city. And on that subject, being outside must kinda feel like Instrumentality to Anno. Especially in places as compact and crowded as Japan. He's lost and oblivious in a sea of souls. So let's stick Asuka, Rei, and Misato's actresses in the crowd for good measure, as well as some dummies of them. The familiar. These three girls being there are kinda symbolic of Japanese pop culture, and them being symbolic of their effect on it and their impact in the public consciousness. Or you could see it as a place to focus in the crowd, like a lost kid at a mall looking for his mom. The letters that flash on screen are more things deriding Anno and always worked so hard to build. Well, some of them. Some of them say stuff like Akari rape man or other creative complaints, but then others are kinda nice. They're letters of praise. Like he's experiencing this overwhelming stimuli of emotion. Both the good and the bad are just becoming this blur of opinions. He doesn't know if he did the right thing or not. He doesn't know how to react. No matter how many people say nice things to you and praise you for what you did, even the smallest negative inkling can trigger a feeling of self-doubt in anyone. And one bad reaction can suddenly become omnipresent in a sea of good ones. I feel like it's no coincidence that immediately after the letter saying die, it instantly cuts to Rei's throat being slashed, as if to say fuck you directly to the guy who longed for Hideaki Anno's death. And then right after the slashing is the sequence where Shinji comes to terms with himself. I won't die, I will live. This theater's empty. There's like 80 jokes I can make here, but they're all too easy. But hey, one benefit to the Netflix release is us getting to see this guy flip us off in HD. Trains are Shinji's psyche. To him, these are equivalent to running away, to escapism. Hence why each introspection session occurs on a train. The old-ass manga entertainment release of End of Eva actually included a 6.1 surround sound mix for this movie. And scenes like this make me realize why. I love how the multi-audio channel effect here works with the voices. They kinda divvy up how they manage this. Sometimes Shinji's in the center while Rei's in the left speaker, as if we're Shinji and she's speaking directly to us, whispering in our ear. Other times, Shinji's voice will drift around in the audio channels as if he's floating in the sea of LCL, while Rei's voice stays anchored in the center as if she's omnipresent. Sex in Evangelion is the unification of souls. It's Instrumentality beta. Two human beings interlocked with all their barriers dropped to give into their passion, lust, and desire. Something immediately driven home by this image of Rei in cowgirl position with Shinji, her hands sinking into his chest. For Shinji to reject her advances is to reject her, to reject instrumentality. It's to reject this world without barriers. I don't think this is meant to allude to anti-sex as a message. I'm more privy to this sequence actually being a message about compulsion and moderation. Instrumentality is like a big orgy, I guess. Fucking hippies. I'm so mad I didn't discuss this moment in my initial version of the video because this is one of the ultimate displays of choice, free will, and humanity in the movie. Now first, Shinji looks at the cross he's holding, likely thinking about what Misato had told him earlier, and finally letting all of that sink in. He's on his own. It's time to make his own decisions. Human beings make mistakes and have regrets, but that doesn't mean he can't still live. He does regret his past and does regret his actions, but now he rejects the Shinji who's been forged by those actions and experiences, relinquishing the cross to show us that he's literally letting go of that past, and letting go of his dependency of Misato. The cross to Misato was her dad. The cross to Shinji is Misato, and to both of them, it's a symbol of letting the tragedies of their past forge them and their regrets define them. But he now rejects that, in favor of his true individuality and internalized compassion. This is no longer a full regression of character, it's now a learning experience. Shinji removes Rei's hands from his chest, rejecting the path of escapism and hedonism, instead holding her hand, validating her as an individual. You are not just some object to me. I've come to terms with this. You are you, and we can connect in a healthy, normal way as people. It's amazing, and I'm, again, so mad I did not squeeze this in before I uploaded it the first time. He did make the choice to have humanity reduced to nothingness, but earning the affection of Lilith, he now chooses the path of life, the path of existence, not death, but rebirth. That's the title of the recap movie that came right before this one. Despite enduring unspeakable pain, despite suffering human duplicity and duality, Shinji still desires human interaction. He still wants to try again to be a good person and to live. Even through all of this pain, he hasn't given up on his own self-improvement. He hasn't given up on the real world. After liquefying all of the human race, does he even deserve their companionship still? Well, that's for the audience to decide. But for Shinji's personal feelings, as far as that goes, he feels it's worth attempting yet again, because even though now he can only feel pleasure, all those times where he suffered, at least his feelings were his. At that time, he knew his feelings were real. The music rises as the Eva withholding Shinji from this fate of instrumentality bursts forth from the Eye of Lilith, the Chamber of Guff reopening, flooding the earth with human souls. With her no longer being needed to nurture and coddle humanity within her perfect reality, God deteriorates and collapses. Lilith. Lilith deteriorates and collapses. Unit 1 now drifts forever amongst the stars, as a constant symbol of humanity. Yui's final desire is fulfilled, allowing her to remain as that very symbol which will never die, even 10 billion years from now. When the Earth, Moon, and Sun are gone, Eva will still exist. A human being will still exist. Shinji was never allowed to know his mother. His memories of childhood, of her, all erased. This moment right here is the first time he gets to see her and speak to her, as well as the last. We could say the reason Asuka's the only other person present is because of her Eva. They do have mom souls in them. Shinji and Asuka could have literally been birthed from them. Or it could be her incredibly strong will to live as her own independent being. Either way, I'm glad Instrumentality has a proper healthcare plan to patch up all those boo-boos from her fight. It's not lost on me that Shinji is explicitly told that anyone can return from this fate of Instrumentality, but part of me also believes that the Evas might help push Asuka and Shinji out faster. You know, because of the Freudian thing. This explains Shinji's little look when he hears the plot. He probably assumes this will be another human, like him and Asuka, freeing themselves from Instrumentality. In actuality, it's just Rei, bookending her initial appearance at the start of the show with one final goodbye. Humanity no longer needs the coddling of God, so God is no longer needed. Live. But what actually was lost on me is that they've been here for a very, very long time, or at least Shinji has. The Schmuck 2 pointed this one out to me. Misato's cross is corroding with rust. This could be quickened by them being next to salt water, but in general we can ascertain that a significant amount of time has passed from Shinji's exit to this current point we're witnessing. Why does Shinji choke Asuka? Well, the easiest answer is the one I alluded to before, that he hates her. He's acting upon that same deeply rooted desire we've seen earlier within his head. But when Asuka, the symbol of Shinji's antagonism and pain, lovingly strokes his face, he's overwhelmed with emotions and doesn't know how to react anymore. He can't take the life of someone who showed affection towards him no matter how ubiquitous with suffering she is. These aren't tears of joy. They are the same guttural tears he sheds once Misato dies. Alternatively, or even overlapping, he choked her to confirm that he's in reality now, and not just in the Sea of LCL. The opposite of a world of bliss is pain, so he's inducing pain hoping to receive pain. When he's instead greeted with love, the realization that this is reality is what breaks him. Actually, I think in this scenario he could be crying because receiving a feeling of love doesn't confirm to him that he's escaped. He's sad knowing he's in a falsified peppy world, potentially recompensed by his sadness being real or by the words Asuka says to him hurting him. Or, Shinji's already been broken by everything that transpired. He's acting out of instinct, the same way he did when he jerked off to Asuka. Something in his head really, really wants to hurt woman. Here's a very deep theory that I actually tend to agree with very heavily. Many people phrase this ideology in different ways with their convictions of it, but Nameless gave me a GIF, or GIF, fuck you, which sums things up in a very neat and tidy bow. Do you love me? Love is destructive. Take care of yourself. I need you. How disgusting. Not only are a lot of those quotes from the show, these are episode titles we see flash on screen during the End of Evangelion, as well as the last 2 episodes of the show. Give or take for both of them, it's kind of divvied up between End of Eva and the show. As if to say how disgusting is the final title, the final theme. The sequence is a perfect little summary of Asuka and Shinji's relationship, as well as his relationship with humanity, echoing his departure from Instrumentality. Love is destructive, and him choking her seems to imply some holdover traits from the Gendo side of him, only now as a more active vehicle for change. He's rejecting her to save himself from being rejected. Still. Even after everything he's been through, he's still doing this. Take care of yourself is his acceptance. She greets his violent gesture with love, as if to say he needs to keep trying to live, with or without her. She validated him as a human with this one singular stroke, even through the lens of Shinji's arc of learning to act upon his own will. We start off with him doing what he thinks he needs to do, because he doesn't really understand her. He doesn't really understand how she feels. He made an assumption, and both made the choice to strangle her and then let her live, exactly the same as he did with all of humanity during Instrumentality. And everything he learned within Instrumentality should be taken to heart, as evident in this exchange. He breaks, realizing for the first time he needs her. He needs companionship and needs love. He is a social creature who in this final lesson learns he cannot reject the real world because he has yet to understand the real world. His tears are guttural and ones of suffering and confusion. I stand by the idea of the entire world being left in ruin for this very reason. His actions should have consequences. Although he learns a great deal about himself and about how to love himself, there should still be repercussions for his misdeeds. Much like the one of Gendo being devoured and isolated to death, the potential for people to come back is up in the air, and the widespread repercussions of Earth destruction is slightly vague. There is that whole sequence where like all the crosses are rising up out of the earth and all the little dots that look like the LCL souls are rising up while everybody is screaming during the Come Sweet Death sequence, but whatever. And then keeping in mind that the second impact, melted the ice caps, and caused an indefinite summer, sinking half of the world under the sea. Well, the first impact was the initial contact of Lilith and Adam to the Earth, thus spawning human life. If these two elements are anything to indicate what the result of the third impact would be, which is done by both Adam and Lilith under the guide of Shinji, then this is practically a reset of the world. The second impact's destruction was actually lessened by Sele by reducing Adam to an embryonic state. The third one has no restrictions with its potential destruction outside of Shinji's thoughts and feelings. And look at this. Shinji, you caused this. You learned. But this is partially because of you. And now you have to live knowing what you've done as the ultimate lesson of self-love and the dangers of nihilistic thinking. It's all very disgusting. Humanity is very disgusting. Human nature is very disgusting. How disgusting. End. Black. Even as I typed certain parts of this, really bearing into the nitty-gritty of this movie, I am overwhelmed with emotion. No other work of media has emotionally affected me as consistently as this movie has. Not only is it amazingly directed and produced, it's a genuine, soul-bearing film that comes from the deepest part of its creator's heart, coming out in a more raw, realistic, and, God, I hate to admit it, but relatable way than I've ever seen before. I see a lot of what could have been myself in Shinji as a human being. A lot. I hate that. I hate that he's so perfectly realistic as a piece of shit and a brat. I've rewatched Hot Fuzz a lot because I love it as a movie. Apocalypse Now, Shaun of the Dead, Akira, Star Wars, RoboCop, LA Confidential, A Silent Voice, all of them, and more, because I love them as films, as crafts, and as experiences. They're wicked cool, and I want to share them with as many people as possible so we can talk about how cool they are, or even so I can yell at them when they don't like them as much as I do. But nothing have I so consistently revisited and still been both impressed, immersed, and emotionally distraught by than End of Evangelion. I can watch this movie anytime and be inspired. This movie is fucking art in every sense of the word. In every sense of media production, this is fucking art. In every sense of animation, this is fucking art. And all of it happened in 1997, same year I was born. I love this movie. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to me, and I hope this was able to enlighten you or intrigue you. Feel free to give me shit in the comments if I screwed something up, because you know, a lot of this shit is interpretation. And I think depending on the person you're talking to, a lot of things will be interpreted different ways. I'm not gonna be a fucking school teacher to you, who's telling you you can only interpret this movie the way I said it to. I got the fucking suicide attempt wrong at the start. I got that wrong. So, again, if you feel like anything I've said here is overextending or off the mark, or you disagree with it, or you have a different opinion, let me know. I would genuinely love to see everybody's opinions on anything I said here and even this movie. That would be fucking great. Once again, thank you, and enjoy this 80s J-pop. It's called Bay City. The song's name is Bay City. I'm using the end chorus of Bay City. Look up Bay City.